Turning now to a horrific story out of Cameroon, where extremely disturbing video has surfaced all over social media showing the African country's soldiers appearing to execute several women and children. Our partners at BBC News launched an investigation into the videos, and they were able to prove Cameroonian soldiers committed the murders. Cameroon's government initially dismissed the executions as fake news. For more on this, let's bring in CBS News foreign correspondent Deborah Patta. She is joining us from Johannesburg, South Africa. Deborah, this story is so troubling, and the video is extremely hard to watch, and so we should warn our viewers. The footage is so disturbing, even though you won't see anyone getting killed, it's very difficult to watch. So take us through this story and take us through the BBC's investigation, where they were able to use technology available to everyone to come to the conclusion that it was Cameroon soldiers that executed these people.
So, Vlad, let's just stress again, this video is disturbing, and we're not actually showing the part where the women and children get killed. This video, when it first surfaced on social media, was immediately dismissed by the Cameroonian government as fake news. What you see in the video is 2 women and 2 children being led by camouflage men at gunpoint along a dirt road. The one woman is holding the hand of a little girl, the other has a toddler strapped to the back. The men are accusing them, they appear to be Cameroonian soldiers, accusing them of being members of Boko Haram, the militant Nigerian group. They are then blindfolded. The 2 women and the little girl are forced to kneel down. The little toddler looks directly at the camera, and then they are shot at point-blank range, executed. This video only emerged in July of this year on social media, and when it emerged, there was a flurry of speculation about where it occurred. Some said Mali, and then they said no, Mali was trying to smear the Cameroonian government, and that's when the BBC's Eye on Africa investigative team actually got involved and tried to verify this video. The remarkable thing about their investigation, Vlad, and I think this is a lesson to all of us, is that they used tools available to all of us. They used Google Earth to identify where it took place, Zelefet, in the north region of Cameroon. They used satellite imagery to determine when it occurred, even looking at the shadows cast by the soldiers as they moved along, where they would have taken place in a particular year. It turned out between March and April of 2015. They identified the uniforms, the weapons that were used, and the names of the men that were involved and took part in the shooting. The uniforms was an interesting one, because the Cameroon government said no, they couldn't be our soldiers. They don't wear that kind of uniform in the far north region of Cameroon. Well, the BBC had footage to disprove this. We even have our own footage at CBS. We were in that area in the same year, in 2015, with the Cameroon military in the exact same area, and our video shows them wearing the exact same uniform as the ones the men are wearing in this particular video. As a result, the Cameroon government has now changed their tune. After denying for weeks the killings, they then arrested 7 men, 3 of whom match up to the men named by the BBC. We spoke to the Cameroon government today, and they said these men were being court-martialed as we speak, that they were very skeptical at first. They didn't believe it because the soldiers in the video did not behave in any way consistent with the training and the principles that Cameroonian soldiers get. But they then conducted an investigation. It turned out to be true, and that is why the men have been arrested and now will face charges of murder. Vlad?
You know, Deborah, you're obviously based in Africa. You know, I spent several years there as a foreign correspondent. And one of the things that I've told people here in 2018 is the first time I actually heard the term fake news was not here in the United States. I first heard it from leaders in West Africa, specifically in Nigeria, and I remember it very distinctly when those 300 girls were kidnapped by Boko Haram in April of 2014, where the military and the office of the president, of the Nigerian president, accused us and you and other reporters of spreading fake news, of spreading propaganda about the capture and the rescue attempts of these children. And it's just interesting to me that their first reaction was to also label this fake news. And the power that the military or the government in some of these countries holds over its people to be able to suggest that news that is coming from legitimate sources is not true. And we struggle with that here in the United States. We're a modern society. South Africa is also a modern, first world country. But in other countries on the continent, it's much harder. And so what the BBC did is even all the more incredible, given that they were able to get the government of Cameroon to sort of change their tune.
I think what's particularly remarkable is that the BBC team didn't even go to Cameroon. They used tools that are available to all of us. It's the same principles of journalism, Vlad. Who, what, where, when, how. The things we learned when we were studying, when we were sort of, bright and starry-eyed coming out of university and learning the skills of our craft. Those don't change. But the tools available to adhere to those principles are changing. And they're freely available. I mean, using Google Earth. We all saw that movie, Lion, where this young Indian boy is lost on a train, travels thousands of miles, is eventually adopted by an Australian couple, and then 25 years later traces his mother to the exact location using Google Earth. That technology is available. It's too easy to dismiss things as fake news. They can be verified, but it requires rigorous investigation and reporting, and that is the onus that falls to us. Our job hasn't changed. The tools have a little bit.
So you spent some time with the military in Cameroon. Just explain to our audience what they're like, because the government's first reaction was, well, this isn't who our troops are. These are the things that they do. What did you learn from your time with them?
Vlad, we were embedded with the Cameroon military in 2015, the exact year that this incident, this atrocity took place. And you have to understand that at that time, Boko Haram, the organization, the Islamic organization, the militant Islamic organization responsible for, as you said, the kidnap of those over 200 Chibok schoolgirls, was fighting a war on the northern parts of Nigeria. And that war had spilled over into Cameroon. So Cameroonian soldiers had been sent to assist the Nigerian military, a tragedy really, because Cameroon is one of the poorer countries in Africa, Nigeria one of the richest, as you well know. You spent a lot of time there, and so there they were on the border. It was a very, very tense time. We went out on patrol with them as they hunted for Boko Haram militants, and this time was tense also because Boko Haram had started using young children, often girls as young as 13, sometimes even younger, as suicide bombers. So everyone was a suspect wherever we went. The major that we interviewed in our piece, Major Belters Kwede, was killed a few weeks after we interviewed him in combat. So certainly a very, very tense time. Now, this doesn't in any way excuse or exonerate anything happening in the video. The soldiers we went out with were unfailingly polite and respectful and did their job dutifully. Obviously, they were under the eyes of an international camera. But I think what it does show is that the times itself, the context was very different. That violence has diminished now. Also, accusations of being in Boko Haram flew around very easily. We went to a refugee camp where we spoke to a young woman who had been kidnapped by Boko Haram, taken as a bride, a euphemism for a sex slave. She managed to escape, but she was pregnant with the child of her captor. This poor woman suffered a double injustice. Not only was she kidnapped and repeatedly raped, she was then shunned by her community for having a child not only out of wedlock, but a child fathered by the disgraced Islamic group Boko Haram. So therefore she was completely dismissed by her community. And I think the importance of a video like this is that an atrocity like this would normally go unnoticed, unreported, unpunished. But because of the presence of social media, there are mobile phone cameras everywhere. They could be capturing an atrocity that could surface at some stage. It can be verified, Vlad.
And it's, I guess, some small measure of relief that the Cameroonian government says that they've been arrested immediately. I'm quoting from the Minister of Communication here. He says it was just a handful and they were arrested immediately. Presumably they're going to face some sort of due process. But for those two mothers and those two little babies, there was no due process. It was these soldiers acting unilaterally to execute them. And as you point out, Deborah, this happens many, many times in that part of West Africa. And I just wonder, yes, we're able to see in this instance these poor people that are killed, murdered, essentially. But you know, for people who want to know more about what is happening there, it becomes really difficult because I'm not trying to disparage the local Cameroonian press, but they're under enormous pressure. They could themselves well be executed by the military if they print or if they appear on television to show what we're showing right now.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a very difficult situation, and often in a lot of the countries that we're talking about, there isn't the kind of free and open media that you see elsewhere in the world. So it does require a measure of bravery, and there are a lot of brave journalists on this continent trying to verify things. Sometimes they even witness the atrocities themselves. Look at what's happening right now in Cameroon. Whilst the violence with Boko Haram has diminished, there is also the potential right now for that country to be plunged into civil war. There's horrific violence and atrocities and abuses that are occurring between Anglophone and Francophone speaking members of Cameroon. The country has two official languages, English and French, and there is essentially a war going on. The Anglophone parts of Cameroon make up about a fifth of the country, and over recent years they want to separate and form a different country called Ambazonian, and this has led to violent clashes with the military and horrific abuses that are happening on both sides. Again, those abuses have been captured by social media. There are videos that are circulating on social media. Some of those videos have been verified. They are 100% true. The atrocities did occur. Others are complete rubbish. There is one video purportedly of a house being burnt down in Cameroon. Turns out it was in Colorado in the United States. And so again, you know, one has to be very careful about this kind of thing. But there are very worrying things happening in Cameroon right now. The current president, Paul Biya, who served 6 terms, seeking a 7th term, he's been in power since 1982, has certainly swung power in favor of French-speaking Cameroonians. So this unrest has the potential to turn very violent. There's an election next month that is taking place. So it's certainly a country that needs watching. Perhaps one of the most worrying things is that people trying to flee the violence when they get on buses are being forced by the government to register not only their names, but the names of those people receiving them elsewhere in the country. You know, and the idea of lists being drawn up along ethnic, national, language lines is very worrying. We've seen the problems this can cause elsewhere on the continent of Africa. So it is a country that needs watching, and it needs rigorous journalism, both from those inside and outside covering this continent. Vlad?
Yeah, and you know, I know that it's difficult urging our viewers to watch the BBC's investigation. They actually did something pretty cool. They put a thread on Twitter where they just take you through their investigative methods. And the one thing that struck me, Deborah, in covering stories like this and reporting on stories like this, and I know it's the same for you, is when you watch these women with their children being led to what they know is going to be their execution, they don't shout, they don't cry, they don't protest. No one in the village protests, because that's how we here in the West can understand marginalized people, the things that they suffer through every day. It's sort of just a fact of life for them that they have to deal with, and no one should have to deal with what folks like this are going through almost every single day. And so we certainly want to shout out to our partners at the BBC News for shedding light on this story and for the incredible work that they did. But we also thank you, Deborah, for sharing your analysis and your insight and your reporting with us as well.
Thank you.